Jonathan, I want to start with you, and I want to ask you about this report. For people who don't know who Mr. Navarro is, he is an ideological soulmate for Donald Trump. He sees the world the way he does. This wasn't the kind of red flag raised in late January from the kinds of people that we know Donald Trump ignores: senior intelligence officials, senior State Department officials, senior experts. This was someone who is as Trumpy as it gets, who wrote a memo, 2 memos, warning Donald Trump that up to 500,000 people in this country could die. What's the White House reaction today to this being made public?
Ideological soulmate is the right turn of phrase here, Nicolle. Peter Navarro is a China hawk. He is tough on trade. He aligns with the president on most economic issues. He's lost some battles within the building to Steve Mnuchin and others, Gary Cohn, when he was still within the West Wing. But he is someone who the president largely sees eye to eye with on trade, on economics, and in some ways how those things influence foreign policy. So the revelation of these memos is sort of stunning because it's a warning from a very different place. As you said, it's not the intelligence agencies that the president seems rather, doesn't have an issue ignoring their warnings from time to time, from Russian election interference to other matters. It's not some of the health experts with whom he has broken with publicly and privately since this pandemic began. This is someone who he usually listens to. And Navarro's memos, and perhaps their release might be a little self-serving today, but to clean up Mr. Navarro, who came under extreme withering scrutiny in the last few days because he fought with Dr. Fauci about this anti-malarial drug. But still, they're dated from January. This was clear that this pandemic, at that point, largely still contained to China and to Asia, was on the minds of the president's inner circle, and yet the warnings were ignored. And it just is the latest piece of evidence, along with warnings from Secretary Azar, from the CDC and others, that this president and the inner circle of this White House ignored in favor of pushing forward with the economy over public health concerns.
You gave me 2 things that I want to unpack with you, Jonathan Lemire. The first is the motive for this getting out. And I don't like to talk about how things become public. You all dig really hard for them, Jonathan Lemire, and this is more great journalism during this time. But let's sort of show our work to our viewers. Peter Navarro is on the side of the right-wing media pundits, Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, and Donald Trump, in pushing a drug that Anthony Fauci describes as something almost exactly like this. It's too early. There's not enough testing. Much more information is known. Donald Trump is pushing a drug, and it was reported over the weekend that Peter Navarro raised his voice in the most heated confrontation within the coronavirus task force. The day that was in the New York Times and your news organization and others, the day afterward, a memo comes out making him look like he was one of the smart ones, one of the sane ones. Talk about how self-serving the people around Donald Trump are, even as Americans are dying.
Right. Without getting into particular sources on this particular story, what this is a reflection of is how it has often been within the president's West Wing. There's always been, it's been riven by rivalries. It has been, people act in self-interest. They push their own agendas. They try to get the president's ear, often by trying to do so during the media. And right now, we have, as you just said, this great divide about the potential of this combination of malarial drugs that may or may not be proven effective to treat the coronavirus. The president is all in on it. We hear him, even though he admits from the briefing room podium that he's not a doctor, he is pushing for their use. Navarro also is doing so. A lot of the right-wing media, from Mark Levine, the conservative radio host, to Donald Trump Jr. on his Twitter feed, to certainly a lot of the heaviest hitters at Fox News, are pushing forward as well. Dr. Fauci and others are saying it's possible that it will be proven right, but we simply don't know, and is urging caution. There's not enough science. There's not enough data. There hasn't been enough time to know whether or not this is going to work. And that erupted in a weekend meeting at the White House, the fight between the two. And suddenly, as you pointed out, these memos emerge that make him look like he was the one preaching caution and concern about this growing pandemic. But it goes to show that in terms of this president, he can go back and forth depending where he is. He was very close, Nicolle, very close to ordering that the nation be reopened on Easter, even though just now, with Easter only a few days away, New York City and other places are going through the worst of the crisis. It's only going to spread. So at the moment, he's leaning towards the doctors in terms of the reluctance to open up the economy or the hesitation, but he's leaning towards the others to push forward this medicine, thinking it can accelerate a return to normalcy and help his reelection chances.
Well, I don't know Mr. Navarro, and I don't care about Mr. Navarro's equities, but I think this story is really important in terms of illuminating what Donald Trump knew and when he knew it. We don't know that Donald Trump read these two memos, but after they circulated inside the West Wing, here's what Donald Trump said.
We think we have it very well under control. We have very little problem in this country at this moment, 5. We pretty much shut it down. Coming in from China. Now, the virus that we're talking about having to do, a lot of people think that goes away in April with the heat. What do you have, a very small number of people in the country right now with it? It's like around 12. Many of them are getting better. Some are fully recovered already. We're finding very little problem. Now, you treat this like a flu. When you have 15 people, and the 15 within a couple of days is going to be down to close to 0. It's going to disappear. One day it's like a miracle. It will disappear. Now the Democrats are politicizing the coronavirus. And this is their new hoax.
Jonathan Lemire, it speaks for itself, but the idea that Donald Trump didn't know what he was possibly dealing with, what this country was about to face, when it was coming from the intelligence community, it was coming from Anthony Fauci, I'm sure it was coming from Secretary Azar. Now we know it was coming from the Trumpiest of West Wing advisors, Mr. Navarro. What does the White House say about that tape that will live forever?
It will be. It's a tape that's going to be played in cable news broadcasts and certainly one that's going to be played in campaign ads as we head towards November. You're hearing it from the president himself and his top aides. It's a sense of denial and an attempt to rewrite history. Suggesting the president was on top of this. And they point to his suspension of the flights from China, which certainly most believe was a useful step, but not nearly enough. First of all, it may have come too late, and it wasn't accompanied by other efforts that other measures that we've seen other countries take in order to slow the spread, most notably the widespread testing. The nations that have turned the corner on battling this pandemic blanketed their citizens with testing, and that's simply, even now, a month or more into this crisis, is not happening here in the United States. This is a president, as we've been reporting all along, who is sort of in denial about this. He had, it's hard. It seems like a lifetime ago, but just a month or two back, the White House was feeling, and his reelection team, feeling really good about where they were. They had just beaten back impeachment. He had been acquitted by the Senate. The economy was doing well. The Democratic field was a bit of a mess. And the president, with a huge campaign war chest, was excited to use this spring to attack his opponent, whether it be Bernie Sanders or now most likely Joe Biden, and use this time to really pummel the Democrats and set the tone for the campaign in the year ahead. And according to our reporting, he couldn't come to grips with the idea that that's not what he was going to be doing anymore, and that the number one argument for his reelection, a strong economy, was about to vanish because of the growing threat of this virus.
Dr. Hodes, I'll let you steer clear of the politics, but in terms of arguments for one's reelection, I can't imagine that the sad headlines coming out of New York State and really from coast to coast every day about the numbers of deaths and that body of public sentiment. We still don't have testing. We still don't have protective equipment for our doctors and nurses, and we still don't have, in the governor's views, adequate ventilators. Where do you see the state of our resources or our ability to fight what's about to come our way in the pandemic?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, we'll have at some point in the future, I can't say when, have to do kind of a deep dive in what went wrong in our national response, why the testing was so delayed, why we didn't have adequate preparation for the big surge, which so many of us knew was coming in intensive care units across the country. We'll have time to do that. Right now, though, I'm very concerned over the next couple of weeks because most of the models indicate that this is going to be the real crunch time. So it's the next 2 weeks when we'll really see that steady increase. So some estimates are saying within a week to 2 weeks, 3,000 Americans will die every day from COVID-19, at least for for a while, which means that COVID-19 will be the single leading cause of death in the United States. Of course, a lot of it with individuals, as we heard from the previous, when you had the mayor on from Chicago, as a health disparity, many of those with underlying diabetes and hypertension as predisposing factors. But the fact remains COVID will be the leading cause of death in the United States, at least for a while. And then figuring out, as the numbers go down, as we move into the month of May, what the world looks like, or what the United States looks like over the next 2 years, because although it will go down, it won't disappear entirely, and there will be a new normal when COVID-19 will come back, will ebb and wave, will wax and wane over the next 2 years, and then charting a path forward for the country in terms of how you manage public health and how we manage the economy. This is where it's going to be really important to have extraordinary leadership to guide us through this period.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.